Welcome to the Content Repurposer podcast. And I'm Pooja Arshanapally, and I help authors repurpose their book's content into different formats for bigger impact. Here we have Sarah Shelton. She is the founder of Girl Louie, a brand marketing agency. She specializes in storytelling as a form of marketing, developing creative ideas for marketing campaigns, as well as building brands that matter. So thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be on it.
So I was curious because I know you've told me about this, but how did you come up with the name Girl Louie?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I am just a creative. I've just had to own that name because my brain is always on and I'm always thinking kind of outside the box or whatnot. So it kind of came about with an idea for an alias that I wanted outside of just my name. I wanted something where I could flex my creativity, take risks, do whatever I wanted to without it feeling like it always had to come from me, Sarah Shelton. So the name Girl Louie came out of that need to be creative and express myself in ways that felt safe and just like encouraging, anonymous sort of. And then I'm live in St. Louis. I've always liked Louie as like a name. Also, I'm a girl. So Girl Louie just kind of had a ring to it. And I thought it was cool. And I was like, I think I could own this. I think I can own this name as an alias. And so, really, pretty much like any other creative project or endeavor I've done since creating this name back in 2019, just kind of stems as Girl Louie. Girl Louie is a whole bunch of things at this point, but that's sort of where it came from.
When you said alias, I think it's funny because I think a lot of authors they want to be anonymous. I've noticed a lot of them are introverts, so it's interesting when you had the name as an alias to be able to have like a creative outlet. So I was just curious, within your agency, how do you focus on storytelling? How do you go about creating impact on your brands through storytelling?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I started out in college as a journalism major. So I graduated in journalism and it was always about telling stories, writing stories. And I feel like that's how you can really get to the essence of anything really is to like understand what the story is behind it. And I feel like the best form of marketing that I've had experience with in the jobs that I've worked at or the organizations I volunteered for it was always when there wasn't a story to sort of connect to the audience, then I found that the marketing felt like it was like lacking in real sort of like purpose driven sense of who these companies and organizations are. So I think stories really have the opportunity to connect people. They have the opportunity to sort of humanize brands, break down the barriers that maybe a mission statement or values might provide. And when you can actually tell the story through that, I think that's usually the thread through that can connect to the customer, like right in the heartstrings. So that's usually how we go about always centering stories as a form of marketing. But even to get to the story, I've realized is like there's a whole lead up to even discover the story itself as well.
So when it comes to storytelling, I remember you saying you were talking about how brand like you're humanizing the brand. And I think it's such an important thing to have because I think because I focus on marketing and people are only thinking of analytics and metrics and more of a number approach versus a relationship approach. So do you have like ideas or an examples of how you were able to like humanize a brand?
Hmm. Yeah, I think I've worked with clients before who understand what it is they sell, but they don't know how to necessarily sell it. And usually, especially when I work with entrepreneurs, business owners, they always start with this passion or some sort of problem that they know they can solve through whatever their talent is. And so, right there, usually before you even get to how you solve your problem, is a story. There's always some sort of story as like, oh, I started this brand because I too was impacted by this, or there's always some real like why behind the story itself. And that why of like why you started this product or why you do this work, that why, that's where the story lives. And so a lot of people It can be almost like therapy when you take clients down this journey of like discovering their why. And some people still to this day are working on their why. Their story is like ever evolving because there's so much a part of their brand. It's almost like their growth, like their brand's growth. I kind of feel like that way sometimes with my brand because Girl Louie can be so malleable in like what it is I have interest in at this time. And so I think being able to really get emotional, to like open up, to really like excavate the parts of yourself that are in this story, I think is really important. And I would say examples of the work that we've done with clients where we are utilizing storytelling is essentially humanizing it by talking about the why. Like I think of like Shark Tank, and you know how they go and they pitch these like, products or whatever. The whole show is all about the why, all about the story, and they want to fall in love with like the business owner, right? They want to like believe in them. And I think too, that's how your audience feels to some extent because it's so noisy for us as audience people. And so it's like when you have a story and you're able to humanize the brand, you're able to build the trust. And the trust is like the key thing that turns people into like customers, I think.
Because I actually earlier today, I was presenting an idea, and what you said kind of happened like earlier today. So I was in a workshop and I gave an example. Do you know the author Ramit Sethi?
I don't know. What do they write about?
He works in finance and he wrote a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And I would say like a lot of finance books or people who write finance books, a lot of them were popular because they're focusing on either focusing on building wealth through real estate, building wealth by cutting expenses. I know it's like the traditional like Starbucks coffee or like things like that, but his approach is a lot different where he was more of like having the concept of you define your rich life instead of allowing other people to define it for you. So a
Mhm.
lot of people that home owning is the thing to strive for. But
Mhm.
it's just depends on what you want in general. If you want to vacation, he also talks about the downsides of owning a home. It's more of just giving people choices on what they feel they want for their life instead of allowing like society and other people's pressures to define what they want for their life. That's the whole
Mhm.
goal for it. And that's the approach. And I think that resonates with a lot of people because anyone can tell them how to save money, how to cut costs, but
Mhm.
he's giving a mission beyond that
Yeah.
people can resonate with.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had that question asked to myself, and I've asked that to other folks as well. One is like, how would you define rich or how would you define wealth? And, a lot of times we think it's like monetary, but at the same time, there's usually a why story and why you want to be rich or why you want to buy a home. Like for me, my why is security. I want to be able to have enough money for security and like my family. And if anything were to come up, I want to be able to have a house that my brother-in-law can come and stay at and sleep with us for a couple months if he needs to or whatnot. And so usually there's one extra layer that you have to peel back in order to understand the why. And I think that that why is like kind of like the meaning behind how the driving force behind your goal and like why you want to do it. Um, but yeah, it feels like you have to be really self-aware.
And I think it's also when you're so close in it, you may not be able to understand why you do it, or you're so focused on, let's say, a book or a service that you're offering that you don't even consider other options on how to like market yourself.
Mhm.
So I was just curious, what are common things that people who want to have a brand or they use a brand, what are common mistakes that they make?
I think that a big common mistake with people who think about branding is that they really do it on surface level. They really like kind of dumb it down to being your brand is your colors, your fonts, and your logo. And they don't really understand that that's like the very, very like 10% of what your brand is. And so, not really understanding or even having a mission statement or your core values or That doesn't lead into like what your brand voice is. You can't have your brand voice unless you don't know what it is that you believe in and why you believe it. And so your brand voice dictates then the color choices that you have. Am I going to be a bold brand that has loud colors, or am I going to be professional because I know my audience is professional? So really it's like not only is you have to understand like who you are as a brand, but who your audience is and how you're going to connect to them. So a lot of it's like all encompassing. I've had the title of brand manager at multiple organizations. And a lot of times people think I'm coming in with like a rule book and I'm like, you use the wrong font. Why did you use this color? This isn't the right hex code. And like, it really does dumb down and like does not like bring the essence or the importance of what the job is. And really like being a brand manager is all about setting culture and within the organization, like really like living out. And I know it sounds kind of culty, but really if you have like a good organization with like good values, if your customer touches every person within that organization, we all have to know what the brand is and like, we have to be behind it and like understand it and really believe in it in order for it to all work together, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Mhm.
No, I agree. I think when people think of these type of positions, they think very, again, like surface level, think
Mhm.
of colors, all those things. When you said the why behind, a lot of those things aren't like metric based, or and that's why it's hard for people to conceptualize or may not consider. I think one example is when you build a relationship with people or you build a friendship with someone, you don't have like a checklist of like we got for coffee, then we're friends. Can't quantify a
Right.
friendship. You can meet someone for 20 seconds and have a really good relationship based on that 20 seconds. And
Mhm.
then you could meet someone for a year and still have no relationship with that person. So it's very hard to quantify. But if you do it right, then it just speaks volume and it just like overemphasizes every part of it. And it seeps in through every piece of your marketing as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that not only do you feel it as like the brand owner, but like your audience should be able to feel that as well.
I was just curious because I know a lot of authors, they may have an idea of what a brand is or what they should do, but if someone had to like DIY something, like what are the top things that they should just focus on if they're doing it themselves?
Um, I would say first, take a look at the world around you. What has your algorithms curated for you? Who do you pay attention to and you don't even realize it? Who are you loyal to as a customer? And then think about those folks or those brands and then ask yourself why? Why do you trust them? What do you love about them? And then start writing it down and really kind of getting heady about the relationships you've already established with somebody who really believes in this brand or associates themselves this way, or this person's always on your news feed because you love the content they do, and what is it about it, like why do they do it that way? And then maybe like if there's any of those commonalities that can relate back to you as a person and what you feel comfortable with when it comes to how you engage on social media, what you feel is trustworthy, what you find is educational and resourceful, and then maybe start to like think about how you can emulate some of the folks that you really admire that you find yourself around. If you're an author of like a book that is like an expert in something or offering like some sort of resource or guidance or education, think about really it's just like think about the person you're talking to. Really like think about it. Give them a name. Go through a whole we do like these audience persona exercises which anyone can Google, but we get into like, you know, like do they own their home? Do they drive a car? Do they have children? Are they married? And some of these things, the reason why I get into some of these particular things is because when I've done digital advertising, especially on social media, these are really specific things you can tack on to your ads. And so to know your customer is to really know like who they are. And this helps with a lot of like purchasing decisions that you make in advertising or how you speak to that person and like decide right away what you're comfortable with building a relationship with your customer. If you're not someone who wants to be on camera, who's like being very vulnerable, then your brand voice is not going to be that. Your brand voice is going to be something that's going to have that sort of like boundary between the two of you. And so maybe you have a brand that is very colorful, a lot of patterns and things, but it's never your face. It's just an inviting, warm brand. There's just examples like that I think that like it's really kind of like getting to know what you have the capacity for and like what you feel comfortable with. Don't force yourself into a hole that like you don't fit in because someone told you that's what you're supposed to do, if that makes sense.
Because I think it's also like the perception. I know people go back to colors, but I think the way that you position things, all of it together,
Mm.
it gives a perception of who you are as a person before someone even has a conversation with you. And that's
Mhm.
also really important because it could attract the people you want and also turn off the people you don't want as well.
Yeah. I think with our brand, I say this a lot, but we are pretty like loud about like progressive views that we have as an organization. It really just kind of attracts the people that have the same values as us as and like in the society that we live in, like um I don't ever have to hesitate to speak up for something I believe in because that's what Girl Louie believes in. I think too, like it doesn't bring it. I don't want to bring the clients to me that I don't align with, like personally, about on a values based level at least, because there's too many clients out there, and I can only handle a few. And I'd rather it be the ones that I could be best friends with rather than the ones that are just assholes.
Right. And there's so many people that you talk to, especially if you run your service provider as well as an author. I think we can all agree we've run into so many people that we don't align with, and this just saves you so much more time if you just say who you are and have like your core values out there. It definitely attracts the people that you want to talk to, and it will save you a lot more peace. Well, at least that's with me. It's more of I have more peace knowing that I have people who I want to come to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say if you're a book author who is monetizing their book, say they have your services or whatnot, they're repurposing content, I would say like at the core of it is just building a relationship with your audience. And so if your audience can trust you, they've bought the book, or that maybe they meet you or they meet you on the interwebs or whatever, and they're like, this person's really makes a lot of sense. Oh, they have a book, I'm going to buy it. Or vice versa, they buy the book and then go to you online. That relationship is like the essence of your brand. And so like being able to control your own narrative by knowing your brand, by having your brand voice, having a clear perspective, that only like makes me trust the brand more as a customer because I don't have to second guess what this person is about. I think it just makes sense to really like not be unapologetic about who you are and your brand. And I think that's what grows a special bond between you and the customer.
When you talk about like branding, and I know you covered storytelling in the beginning, what makes a good story for someone to tell?
So I think a good story is, again, kind of knowing your why. Your why is usually the problem that you are wanting to solve or have solved. It humanizes the story more. I think a lot of times our why, it's like peeling that layer back one more that really gets to like the core of things that I think that core can relate to a lot of people on different levels. So it could be like, I want to make money. I want to own a big home. Okay. Okay. So you want to own a big home. I can find a lot of people that also want a big home, own a big home. But if I peel it one layer back and I say, I want to make money so I can feel secure, that connects to even more people because people might get to it a different way, maybe not by owning a big home, but they know on a human level that their why is because they need security. And then from there, I think is how you can tell a really great brand story that can connect to a lot of people because you're pointing to that core belief, that core want, that core essence. And that why I think is like the big nugget of what, makes people pay attention and want to go along for the ride. Another thing too is like when you're telling a story, it's one thing to have like a story arc, like origin story as a brand. Like, I'm a business owner and this is my why, and look at me, now I'm great. That's fine to have in like your about page. But when you actually work on your why, it's really about finding that core and then making your customer the main character. It's actually not about you. A lot of people think that because you're telling a story, like you have to center yourself, and really your customer needs to be centered. So it's really about taking your core essence, your why, and relating it to how it can relate to the customer. So putting the customer on the journey in your story. I've worked with a client that was very like women focused, and we would come up with a bunch of like statements that really talked about how these women were stuck in their lives. And to get unstuck, they had to accept that they needed to go on a journey through life coaching, through career resources, through all these things that this customer offered. But really, the core of it was that it was a woman who was stuck. And then that could mean or interpret anything. And instead of saying, like, we also were stuck, we would say, hey, sis, you're stuck. Let's get you unstuck, or something like that, where it's like very simple. You break it down, but clearly it resonates because there's that like tension. And that tension is like, is the exciting part that you can like flourish things from.
So that's a really good point when you included tension, because I think that's also something that I include when I talk with people is what are those specific tension points that people think of? Because that's a really good way to grab people's attention. If you know the journey of whoever you're targeting, try to understand what are their pain points at different parts of the journey. So then you're able to like hit them at the same, hit those specific targets. And it's more like when someone wants to read your content or ingest some like a video or anything that you create, it's more of you want them to like actually like physically nod yes. Like, like physically be like have like physical reaction to what you're saying. Because it's not just scroll someone to scroll past. It's something that sinks beneath. It's words that sink beneath and like resonate with them as well. It should impact them in some way.
Yeah, there's a woman who has a brand who's in our local network, and every time she posts a LinkedIn, I feel like she's talking directly to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she understands so much her customer because I feel like, holy crap, you're talking right to me. How did you know that like I also feel this way? And so, and I know her, like text her and be like, hey, you posted another thing that speaks directly to me. I love your branding. She's talking directly to me. And so for me as a brand consultant, I love that because I tell her because I have her number and I text her and I'm like, oh my gosh, you just posted another thing on LinkedIn talking directly to me. And I think it's just really great. She's also has her own personal fake corner of the internet. She's just claimed this corner. She doesn't care about anything else. And somehow I'm in that corner. And I love being in just a little corner that she created because I finally feel like someone actually sees me and like is wanting to help me and talk directly to me as a creative with ADHD who is unorganized. It's me. And so I'm like, thank you so much. And so I think too, like really knowing who it is you're talking to and and talk to them. And everyone else can fall by the wayside because they don't realize they need it or they don't need it, you know? And so I think that's super important.
It's another thing that you said to have one voice. That's something that I also think about. It's like you have to be able to talk directly to them instead of having I think a lot of us we want to talk in third person because it seems that we have a like a and it's not to say that like I think that's focused more on company based, but if you're an author and you want to have a brand, I think most people associate you as a person and talking directly towards people. If you have a third person, it can come off like too formal. And if you want to build a relationship, you talk with people.
Yeah. I would think that as an author, you get the unique opportunity to use your own voice with your audience. Is there ever been a situation where you see an author not use their voice and somehow like just use like the book title or something?
I think I get a question a lot where, let's say, like you're on LinkedIn, they ask, where do I post? Do I post on my company's website or do I post on my personal website? And I usually just ask, where's the majority of your audience? And that's probably where you should focus your efforts. And it's mostly the profile because the profile, also the algorithm on LinkedIn promotes the profile more than the company. But I mean, that's where most people interact because people want to interact with people. And I think it's just a different way. I think a lot of people, they want to be more formal or Sometimes they write on ChatGPT and they see all these prompts of and it looks super catchy, but a lot of good copy and a lot of storytelling is very clear and simple, but it's effective. And I think that's what we're trying to convey, where it doesn't feel like they're trying to put up a front. It's just a clear message.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that authors have that, you know, that opportunity to really have that connection with their readers, their customers, their followers. And I think for like a company page, to me, I think it could be an opportunity to possibly like build community on your company page. Like if you're building community and you have more people talking within it, that's one thing that you could curate. But I do feel like being able to personalize it on your own platform, your own profile, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I would say like we're getting close to the end of the podcast. Is there anything that you would like to promote?
So I would say Girl Louie is a boutique agency. We really focus one on one with our clients. So we don't necessarily have a lot of packages that we offer, which I know can sometimes be hard for us because everything is customizable. And we are right now trying to build products around our services that can help the entrepreneur or the everyday sort of person be able to discover their why, unpack their values, really kind of get to the heart of their brand. And then a lot of what we do is really just empowering the entrepreneur to learn things themselves. So we'll teach Canva, we'll teach you how to build your own Squarespace site. It's like the added extra handhold that it takes to really get things going without actually like doing it for the customer. So that is really what we're focused on. And you could always follow us on social for our noisiness that we say, and we have a lot of fun. But on our website as well at girllouie.com, you can find a lot of our services and our offerings. But I would say just follow us, and would love to connect with anyone from this podcast about what they're doing and the type of business that they're focused on. And yeah, I think that being an author and being able to repurpose your content for marketing purposes is such a great thing. And love the opportunity to get to know anyone's why and see how that sort of dictates their branding approach going forward.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast.
I love it. Thank you so much, Pooja. You're amazing. I love following you. So I anytime you want me on here, I'm happy to be on here.